Hello everyone, it's me, Arden Lee. I am the creator of the Repatterning Project, which is a community where we come together to reframe our beliefs and our relationship to the events in our lives in order to optimize our lives for success and happiness. And today I want to talk to you a little bit about the upcoming crisis of Hurricane Florence that's been on everyone's minds lately. Before I get into that, I just want to let you know that if you're interested in learning more about the Repatterning Project, you can look in the description box and there's going to be a link to a Facebook group where you can come and get all your questions answered, as well as a free PDF that you can download and check out and learn a little bit more about what we do. Today I want to talk a little bit about Hurricane Florence in relation to trauma, because not only is so much of the East Coast, especially North Carolina, currently preparing to deal with the physical fallout of what happens during a natural disaster, but that's on so many people's minds so much that a lot of people aren't thinking about what happens, the emotional fallout, the emotional crisis that can happen when a natural disaster strikes your community. Now, trauma is defined by the American Psychological Association as an emotional response to a terrible event, such as a tragic accident, rape, assault, abuse, or a natural disaster. And the thing that is particularly insidious about natural disasters and about the trauma that comes from natural disasters is that it can affect large populations and communities all at once. So if you as an individual are going through a crisis of your own that didn't happen to everyone else around you, it might be a little easier for you to source support from people who are not going through the same thing. But if you're involved in a natural disaster, then everyone in your local community may be facing the same thing, and not a lot of people might have extra to give if they're dealing with their own relationship to the events themselves. So it affects large populations all at once. And even if you're not in the community that was directly affected, you can experience secondhand trauma, or what is known as survivor's guilt, where you feel guilty that you weren't affected, but maybe you have relatives who were there, or people you know, or maybe you just feel extremely sensitive and care about the lives of other people. And you can't tear yourself away from watching the news over and over again and exposing yourself to that triggering footage that can really cause those deep feelings. You know, in the past several years, we've had many more natural disasters than normal. People are talking about, climate change and how that's affecting how the weather happens. And in 2017 alone, there were over 100 deaths from hurricanes. We had Jose, we had Irma, and after Hurricane Sandy, they did a survey in the local community of the areas that were affected by Hurricane Sandy on the East Coast. And what they found in that survey was that 14.5% of people qualified for the symptoms of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So what I want to talk about a little today is that while there are people who are already trying to deal with how communities are going to rebuild themselves, how we're going to reconstruct the infrastructure of our communities, help people to rebuild their homes. What I want to talk about today is helping people rebuild their emotional relationships to their lives and their sense of safety, their sense of community, their sense of home when something like a natural disaster hits, especially something like a flood, like we're looking at, which is something that a lot of people are going to be dealing with in the fallout of Hurricane Florence. So today I have 9 tips for how to deal with the trauma of a natural disaster such as a hurricane. And the first tip I have for you today is to connect with other survivors. I did mention that, when trauma happens on a community level to a large population and not just to an individual, that everyone is dealing with their own stuff, and sometimes people might not have extra, their cups might not be overflowing, so to speak, in order to be able to help you. But the bright side of that is that if everyone is going through the same thing, then there are going to be a lot of people around you who can relate, and you're going to be able to connect with each other a lot more. So get together with people who are going through the same thing, share solutions, share what is working for you, vent to each other, cry to each other. You know what you're going through, and those people can relate to you, and they're right there in it with you. So they need you probably just as much as you need them. So connecting with other people who are going through the same thing that you are going through is always a great idea. Second tip, talk about the event, whether it's with other people or, maybe it's with your family or relatives, or, maybe it's with a counselor. if you're able to process your emotions around the event by discussing it, that's going to help so much more than if you keep everything inside and bottled up. And especially with natural disasters, one of the things that can tend to happen is that people will be so focused on rebuilding the physical infrastructure of their communities that they might actually forget to take care of their emotional selves. So it's very important that, not only are you dealing with whatever fallout is happening to your home, to your community, to how you're going to get to work every day. If you're going to be able to get to work today, if you're going to be able to support yourself, of course, all of those things are incredibly important to deal with. But don't forget to take care of yourself and process your feelings around the event as well. The third tip is that you could always help other people, especially if you're dealing with secondhand trauma and survivor's guilt and you don't have as much to deal with on your immediate plate. That can be a great way to cope with that secondhand trauma, to reach out to other people. But even if you are someone who is directly affected, volunteering in your community and getting together with people, you may also connect with people who can help you as well. If your home needs rebuilding, if you maybe need another job in the wake of the disaster. So you definitely want to be able to get together, and what helping other people is going to do for you is it's going to help you deal very directly with your own feelings of helplessness, and it's going to empower you and say, you know what, maybe I can't control whether a natural disaster hits my community, but what I can do is I can control who I help and who I gave my time to, and I can be a part of the solution to help rebuild my community from the ground up. And that way I also feel better, not only about myself, but I feel better about the events, and I feel less powerless in the face of the cruel face of nature. Another thing you can do, tip number 4, is you can reframe your relationship to the events. So let's say tragedy strikes and the worst happens, and let's say you lose your entire home, which is certainly not a tragedy that I would ever want to minimize or downplay. But maybe you're someone who has been thinking about moving to another place anyway, and maybe this gives you that opportunity to say, you know what, there were certain things in my life as it was that I was getting a little complacent about, and I wasn't really following my heart. I was no longer asking myself, what do I want my life to look like? Where do I want to live? What kind of job do I want to have? What kind of home do I want to have? And take this opportunity, even though it is a tragic disaster, and even though trauma and PTSD are very, very real phenomenons, take the bright side of what you can of that and say, you know what, maybe it's time for me to take my home insurance money from everything that I lost, and maybe it's time for me to go build a life in another part of the country or another part of the world. Maybe that's something I've been wanting to do anyway, so in a way I can look at this and I can take that little bit of a silver lining and say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and take control of my life, and I'm going to use this opportunity to be really deliberate about the life I'm creating, rather than just living a life of routine. And I've been through a bunch of trauma myself. I've been through a bunch of things that have disrupted my life and disrupted my routine. And in looking back at them now, I can say, you know what, some of them may have actually been a blessing in disguise, because it got me out of my rut and it got me to start thinking about what I really wanted in my life. So tip number 5, moving on, there is something called the Disaster Distress Helpline. I'm going to give that to you here. It is 800-985-5990. I'll also put that number in the description box just so you have it available, so you can copy paste it if you need to. That is a free 24/7, 365 days a year helpline that you can call to get some help, to speak to a professional who is trained specifically in dealing with trauma, not just trauma itself, but the trauma that comes from natural disasters. So definitely reach out there. It's a free service, and you'll be able to speak to someone who's going to be able to give you even more tips. And even if you just do like it says in tip number 2, and talk about the event and process your feelings around it, it's going to be helpful, and it's free. And they may also have some advice about actually how to reconstruct your home, how to rebuild your community, how to deal with the fallout of the infrastructure as well. So that's also going to help you combat your feelings of powerlessness, as you're going to be able to get resources for what you can do immediately. And those are trained professionals who are specifically trained to help in the area of natural disasters. So again, that number is 1-800-985-5990. It's completely free. So if you are someone who is involved in that, I really encourage you to do that, because what's the worst that could happen? It always feels good to talk to someone who cares about what is going on in that area. Tip number 6 is you can take an active hand in rebuilding your community. And so getting involved with others and figuring out what people who are local to your community are doing to to help other people, to volunteer, to rebuild infrastructure, connect. And again, this is a way to connect with others and combat those feelings of powerlessness. So you can look into volunteering, whether you live in the area specifically, or whether you're someone who is dealing with secondhand trauma, survivor's guilt, and you want to get involved, you want to help. There are always going to be places to go and rebuild your community. And if there's not something that you identify with as a place where you feel that is a fit for you to be your most helpful, then I encourage you to start your own community. Even if you are, just you find a space in a school or in a church, maybe that they're, willing to donate you just a room with some folding chairs. You can absolutely start your own circle and say, hey, let's get people in the community together. At the very least, we can come together and talk about our feelings in an organized way, and we can be helpful to people that way. So there's always something that you can do to empower yourself. Tip number 7 is I want you to challenge your feelings of responsibility and shame. Oftentimes when things happen to us in our lives that we don't have control over, we end up trying to come up with reasons why somehow this was somehow under our control. If only I hadn't lived in North Carolina, if only I hadn't chosen a community that is, by the coast, maybe this wouldn't have happened. Well, I don't want you to think that way. I want you to really challenge those feelings, because you are not responsible for natural disasters. They happen everywhere. They can happen to anyone at any time, and there is no reason to feel shame around that. So if you notice that kind of negative self-talk happening, where you're starting to put too much responsibility on yourself for the things that are happening to you, I just want you to challenge that voice in your head and just say, you know what, that's not true. This can happen to anyone at any time in any part of the world in some way or another, and I'm not to blame for this. I take good care of my family, I take good care of myself, and this can happen to anyone. So I'm just going to deal with what's in front of me, and I'm not going to get so emotionally attached to it that on a personal responsibility kind of level, that it actually makes me feel bad, and it actually prevents me from moving forward and healing myself and rebuilding my community. Tip number 8, there are a lot of people who experience a crisis of faith, especially if you're a particularly spiritual or religious person, and especially if you have a relationship to God, or even to nature itself, to the concept of spirituality or a benevolent universe. And you may feel betrayed by God, by the cosmos, by whatever higher power you identify with, and say, I think I'm a good person. Why did I deserve this? Can there even really be a God if things like this can happen in the world? And I invite you to challenge that. If you are a person of faith, and that is something that is important to you, and you want to hold on to your faith because it makes you feel better, I invite you to look at all the ways that you are being supported, that you are being taken care of. I had a personal friend who lost everything in a fire. Her entire house, she returned home from a trip away, and her entire house was just in a particularly dry climate, and it had caught fire, and her whole house was burned to the ground. But there was one thing that was incredibly important to her. She had a journal, a notebook with all her personal writings in it that really meant a lot to her, something that was so personal and was irreplaceable. And as she's digging through the ashes of her home and everything that she owns is gone, she manages to find that journal, and it's the one thing that was in the fire that managed to survive. And she was able to reconnect to her faith in the divine that way, and to say, even though terrible things happen that are out of our control and there is no guarantee in life, you know what, I still feel like I am being protected, because this is the one thing that was really, really important to me. And even if I lost everything else, and even if this is a terrible crisis that I'm going to have to get through and it's not going to be easy, I can realize in my heart, I can connect back to that belief that there's someone out there who's looking out for me, because at least I have this one journal. At least I have this journal. This is the thing that was the most important to me, and this survived the fire. So that tells me in my heart that there is someone in, some divine plan where I am being looked out for. And that made her feel so much better, and it gave her the strategy to move forward and cope better. And finally, tip number 9 is absolutely get professional help. There should be resources in communities where people are coming together in order to help each other out. Whether you want to hire a counselor or a trauma therapist, or a social worker to help you individually, or you want to connect to a support group in your community. And again, that disaster distress helpline, 800-985-5990. That's another great way of getting professional help wherever you feel is the best for you to connect. It's very important, if you have someone who has that knowledge of trauma, especially trauma of natural disasters, they're going to be able to guide you through things. When things feel really overwhelming, you're like, I don't know how to get through my emotional process. I have to deal with rebuilding my house in the meantime, or moving to another location. I have to deal with finding a new job. I have to deal with supporting myself and my family. I have to deal with our survival. Working with a professional is, you're going to be able to outsource that emotional processing. They're going to take you through the steps that you need to feel better. And if you want to join us in the repatterning project, where we can help you, change your beliefs, change your relationship to your beliefs and your relationship to the events in your life, so that you can move on, you can be happy, and you can rebuild, and you can be stronger than ever, then I definitely advise you to reach out. Again, look in the description box. You're going to find a link to a PDF that you can download for free to learn more about what we do. And I encourage you, if you feel at all curious about it, do connect with our Facebook group, and you'll find the link there as well. We would love to see you. Come in and say hi. Again, my name is Arden Lee. I am the creator of the Repatterning Project. And in the meantime, everyone out there on the East Coast who is in those areas, just know you are in my thoughts, and I am hoping for the best for everyone involved, and I hope everyone pulls through. And stay safe out there, and remember that no matter what happens, do take care of yourself. In addition to physically rebuilding your home, your emotional, internal experience is important. That's how you experience your life here on earth. So take care of yourselves out there. Know that I'm thinking of you, and we're all going to hope and pray for the best. So stay safe.